Hello, Mary Pat. One second, guys. How is everybody doing? I finally downloaded this app to allow me to use landscape, and I was just making sure that that was all set and ready to go for my live here. And it looked like it was only going to show half a screen, but then I just had to go back out and get started again, and so now it seems to be good. How is everybody doing this lovely fall retreat weekend? Good afternoon, Wendy. Hi, Kim. Yeah, I got your message. I was just hitting go live when you sent it to me there. I had just ran to top up my coffee, so I would have that ready to go, because I needed. I came off nights last night, or this morning, so I slept for a couple of hours and then tried to get everything ready to go. How is the retreat going so far for everybody? I had to use my mushroom mug. I can't tip it because it'll spill there, but I was going to use one of my new mugs today from my recent East Coast trip, but then I was like, no, we're painting with such a fun guy stamp set, so that calls for my mushroom mug. So wonderful. Yeah, I hope I labeled mine right. I'm sure I'm class number 5, so that means that you guys have already had 4. I've been a little MIA so far. I apologize for that. Just like I said, I was kind of in the middle of my work set, so I wasn't able to join in for the yesterday's classes or this morning's because I had to go to bed for a little bit. So thank you, Kim. Yeah, I went with a much more muted color story, but it fits with these gorgeous papers. So love the papers that Kim chose for this retreat. And even though they're a coffee theme, they can still be used, as you can see, beautifully with the mushrooms from the Such a Fun Guy set, because there's lots of different patterns and such that can go. And even actually this paper here does have like some coffee cups, I think, on it. Yeah, there's one hiding right there. But pardon me, excuse me, it's such a tiny little pattern here that I don't even think you would notice. So and actually it just so happened that I think this layer here managed to cover those up. So with your retreat goodies, if you saw the PDF file that I had uploaded just with all the cutting instructions, hopefully you've been able to do that ahead of time. If not, no worries. And oh, I feel like him. I'm getting a hot flash here. Sorry. Should have put a fan in here. Hopefully you had a chance to cut up all your papers ahead of time so that you are ready to go. And what I was going to say was, if not, don't worry, because if you've been with us before for our retreats, you'll know that these videos will be available to you permanently. Now, I will upload to YouTube afterwards, but once they're on YouTube, only the retreat attendees will be able to see those ones, because they will be privately published just for you guys who have paid to take part in the retreat. So I think, what is it, 30 days Facebook keeps them here, but after 30-day mark, don't worry, you can still go back and watch all the retreat videos over on the YouTube, and we'll provide links to you to the class videos so that you guys can like visit this group in the future if you wanted to redo something and then pop over to the YouTube. So hot flashes all weekend. Yeah, it's good times. Good times. I was last night at work a little bit too. I was commiserating with one of our other workers. I'm older than so many of the people that I work with, but one of our ward clerks, she's my age, and yeah, we were talking about all those lovely things. So hopefully you and Carrie are having fun this weekend. So we'll get started here. We're going to make 2 cards. We are going to need Marvelous Mocha ink. I had posted which watercolors I was using ahead of time in the instruction document. So hopefully you've been able to find something kind of comparable. I kind of just broke it down into some simple colors there. But one of the ones that I did use quite a bit was this buff titanium. And I used that one of the last ones that we did as well. Just because I found it kind of mutes things and helps to get like these kind of pastel shades. Oh, great. I can see that my camera is messing up with focus. That's so annoying. Hopefully it won't do that as we get a little closer. I just realized that I had been using my older phone to do a lot of my videos just because my last new phone did that, but then the last few videos I've recorded with this, I didn't think it was doing that. Hopefully it will stop, because I've fiddled around with settings and I don't quite know how to stop it. So hopefully it'll be okay for you guys. But like I said, the buff titanium does help just to mute these colors. A color that we are going to use as well, again, I just said whatever you've got will make it work. But I pulled out this Potter's Pink, and I hardly ever use this. It's a really nice muted pink, like an earthy pink, which was perfect for this mushroom here because I was trying to coordinate with these pinks. But it doesn't wet really well. Like, it's kind of a funny pigment, but I did find it perfect for this one. So that was kind of nice to actually get some use of that, because I like the color of it, but it's just a funny pigment to work with. And then I had used this Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White for the spots on this mushroom. Now I'm still undecided whether or not I'm going to go with yellow, because I don't know if I loved it, or go with a red mushroom, which was why I do have that alizarin crimson in there. I'm not sure yet what I'm going to do with it. I just didn't know if the red was going to be too much of a contrast with these muted ones, and I kind of wanted something a little more toned down, so I wasn't sure I wanted the high contrast of the red. So let's see how we feel about it as we go along. Neutral tint is the color that I'm going to use for, well, neutralizing, as it's in the name, the other colors in here. It's a great color for shadows, because it'll work with any of these. Even I used like with the buff titanium and such. And then some blues and yellows for the, sorry, not blues and yellows, blues and greens for this little background here, which was super simple to do. And a green for, I mean, you can mix your green or get it right out of the tube for that one there. And then yellow ochre is what I used for the yellows in the mushrooms. So you'll need that. I don't think I did it ahead of time, but you'll need a bit of washi tape or painter's tape, because we're going to tape off to get the border around here. I am using a round 8 paintbrush, but feel free to use any round, like probably 4 through 8. Many of those sizes would work well. This is my favorite to date paintbrush, and it's from Silver Black Velvet. Pricey brush, but it's really nice because it comes to a very fine point. You're going to want to have some paper towels with you for blotting off. You'll want 2 containers of water, one for dirty, for rinsing your brush, one for clean, for wetting your paints. And of course, you'll have hopefully stamped out ahead of time with your images that I mentioned. And I had used Totally Taupe for stamping those images out so that we could go with a no lines technique. So we shall get started without further ado, as they say. And oh man, that camera. I should use my old one. Hopefully this won't be too problematic. I'll zoom in a bit, but like I said, it didn't do that the last time I did a video. So let's see here. I've got all of my kit supplies that I prepped ahead of time here. So I think what we'll do is we'll start with this card here, the trio of mushrooms, just because it's a little less involved. So I'm just finding a spot to stick my other one here in the meantime. And that is this bundle of materials here. And then we'll do the little scene afterwards. Okay, so let me just move these things out of the way. I just realized now that I didn't actually clean off my paint palette, which I should have done. I don't always do it when it's just me painting, but when I'm showing you guys what I'm doing, especially if I can manage to get the palette into the frame so that you can see the color mixing, that I think is helpful. So I'm just going to quickly wipe off. I just use the inside of my painter's or my palette lid there. So I'm just going to wipe that off, and I'm going to just place some of my paints in here. I'll leave that alizarin crimson out for right now until we decide what we're going to do. I had done the mushrooms in red for the release peaks, and Kim has that card at her house there. Let me set this aside, that aside, and grab a sip of coffee, and then we'll be ready to go. Hello, Laura. All right, I'll go over what you needed for this card here. For both of the cards, you were doing a landscape fold card. So your card base is the 8.5 by 5.5. You should have scored at 4 1/4 there so that we get that landscape card. Okay, and I'm just going to move that out of the way. And then I left a lot of white space on this card. I don't always do that, but I like the look of it. And I kind of was going by, I'm not a scrapbooker, but I've seen so many really nice layouts where kind of things focus in the middle and you kind of have this cluster of stuff, and then you've got all this white space around it. And I really like that look. So I guess I was kind of drawing a little bit of inspiration from that. So I just kind of let the card breathe a little bit so it's not so busy. I'm so sorry about the focus going in and out. Oh, were you having trouble with your connection earlier, Mary Pat? Okay, you are also going to, I used the, what did I call this? This was the, like the medium gray. I wasn't sure if there was a lighter gray than this or not, but it was the one that had like, I love this cardstock, by the way. It's so pretty. But it was the one with the kind of caramelly colored back to it. So that color of gray, you should have cut one that was 3 1/8 by 4 1/8. And then this tag from the pattern paper collection, which I love, love, love. And it's actually the back of this one, which I had pointed out we used on the other card there. And yeah, see how it does have, if I held it this way, it does have like some little coffee cups on there. But like I said, works because it's such a subtle pattern with the mushrooms, so that it doesn't look like you're kind of throwing random coffee cups in with your mushrooms. So that one measured about 3 by 4. So that's going to be that matting layer. So we'll just take these stickers off here as we go. And what we might do is just assemble this card first before we get going with the watercolor. Also, you'll want the pink pattern layer, and that is 3 5/8 by 1 1/2, and then your gray cardstock will be 3 3/4 by 1 5/8. So we'll take those off there. And then this really lovely earthy toned yellow here, kind of a mustardy yellow. So that pattern paper is 1 1/4 by 5 1/8, and then your matting layer of the cardstock will be 1 3/8 by 5 1/4. So to get this part out of the way here, and then like I said, we can do our painting. We're just going to take an ink blending tool. I don't know whether you use a brush or just like a little sponge dauber, and we're going to grab our Marvelous Mocha ink. And I did not sponge around the edge of that cardstock base, but we'll just grab some ink here and just lightly give a little edging to this paper. I find it very hard to make a card without adding ink to the edges of paper. It just, I don't know, it's just that finishing touch. Losing some little fibers from this, but it just gives such a nice finishing touch. And just Especially if you've got all these layers, it just helps them kind of sink into each other. I just think it finishes it off so nicely. So just going around each of those paper edges here. I'll do all the design papers, and then I will also do the cardstock as well, like the colored cardstock. Whoops. Continuous, but all good now. You know, technology is a wonderful thing when it works, but like how mine's driving me crazy right now because it's coming in and out of focus every time I move my hand, but I don't know what to do. Other than using my old, it's like a couple of phones ago, it doesn't seem to do that. And like I said, my previous phone did, but the last couple of videos I did on this one, I didn't think did. And it's such a better picture quality, but I just need to figure out how to get it to stop doing that. And I know it's because it's picking like a focal point, and because I'm moving, it's bouncing that around, but you're having a freezing problem? Is everybody having a freezing problem? Like I've got my tablet here watching the video, and mine hasn't frozen. I'm just, like I said, it's just my camera's just kind of focusing in and out a little bit. But mine's not actually freezing. But let me know, like, is it a problem from my end or what? Is anybody else freezing? Kim, are you and Carrie freezing at all? I'm just doing this to get rid of any little fibers that may have come off of that blending sponge there. So I'm going to grab some glue. Use your adhesive of choice, tape runner, glue, whatever you like. And we're just going to glue these pieces together. You're all good from your end. Okay. All right. Well, I don't know what to tell you guys. Sorry. I am not the person to come to for techie advice. I can do the basics, but I'm pretty lost when it comes to troubleshooting things. So I usually try to get my husband to help me with stuff like that because it's just not my forte, nor do I care to make it my forte. I have other things I'd rather spend my time on. And I have the advantage of having somebody who, like between my husband and my son, they're, my son-in-law a bit as well too. They all are able to fix things for me. And then we also have, like Dean's cousin is very much into the computer industry. Like he does programming or something. So he's usually a really good resource for us too if it's something that Dean and Nathan can't figure out. True, Kim's just saying there, if nobody saw, like it could just be your own connection. So you could pop out of the video, excuse me, sorry, and then pop back in and see if that makes a difference. I shall be here waiting for you. All right, super easy card base to assemble here. I do have to stamp, I almost forgot, I have to stamp my sentiment though. I'm going to just go ahead and assemble the card first, and I'm going to put the whole thing into my platform, and then we'll stamp that together there. So, you too, Wendy. What do you mean, you too, as far as you're freezing as well? Or that you have somebody else that you can kind of rely on to address any techie issues. So the first paper layer that we're going to add to the card base here is this yellow one. And we're going to go not quite right at the bottom of your card. Make sure your card's opening the right way. But leave a little bit of white space at the bottom. And stick that down there. And then next up, we'll go with the pink. And I'm just going to flip this here. And we're going to go leave a little bit of that yellow showing on both the bottom and this edge here. And Also make sure you're leaving a bit of white space showing at the top there of your card base. And we'll plop that down there. And then we'll add this one here. And then this one, when you position it, just make sure that you've got a little bit of pink showing underneath here so you can see all those different layers. And then, of course, some of the yellow as well. So just a little bit up from the pink. And then that's all there is to that. Okay. I'm going to grab, actually first, sorry, I've got to put the lid on my glue. And then I'm going to grab my stamping platform here. And I shall just put the whole card base in here. And yes, I just pinched my fingers with my magnets. Let's stick this down here. And then we'll grab our sentiment, Love You So Much, from the Such a Fun Guy set. And we'll position it so that it's up in the corner of this white space of the frame. Trying to make sure it's going to be straight. And then we shall grab our Marvelous Mocha ink back again here. And then, hello Margaret, how are you? And then we'll go ahead and we'll stamp this. I'll take a few passes to make sure that I actually probably need to get a re-inker for this Marvelous Mocha. So I'll have to do a few passes with it because it's, make sure that I get a nice clear impression. But I'm being careful not to smush my stamp down. I'm just applying a nice even pressure there. I'm going to take one more pass and then we'll call that good. It's good. That'll do. That'll do, pig. All right, and I'm just going to quickly clean my stamp off here. Somewhere is my rag. There it is. And I'll just give that a little clean. And put it back on the on the stamp set before I lose it. And then we'll put that to the side and take our card base out. And there we go. So that part is done. Now we have to paint our little mushrooms. So let's set that aside for now, and then we will grab it back in once we've painted. I'm just setting up my sample there. So I had asked you guys to stamp this tree out ahead of time. It's just on a little scrap of watercolor paper. Let me pull that back in there. So it's a trio of mushrooms I call, but it was actually made up of two of the images. So we used this little duo here and then this tall single one. So if you hadn't stamped it ahead of time, I'm sure everybody here has probably had experience with masking things to kind of make a layered image. But in case you haven't before, the way to do that, I tried to explain it the best I could in my document ahead of time. But you're going to stamp what's closest to you first. So that's the duo of mushrooms here. And then create a mask. Once you've stamped that, you put your mask over top of that image, like so. And I just used a Post-it note because it's got a little bit of stickiness on there. But sometimes I use like a repositionable adhesive. I've got a little tape runner that has repositionable adhesive. And then you stamp your background image. So I stamped this and you'll see how there's this little edge of that, what do you call it, like a fluted mushroom edge. You'll see that it stamped onto the mask. So then when you remove the mask, you've got what looks like this little grouping of mushrooms that just grew together on their own. So again, that is in our Totally Taupe ink. I forgot to have that showing at the beginning of the video there, but that's the Totally Taupe ink, and that's my favorite ink for no lines coloring, whether it be with paints or markers or pencils. Grabbing a sip of coffee. How many cups of coffee has everybody consumed today so far? I'm just going to bring in my waters, and I am going to zoom us in here. And like I said, hopefully we don't have too many issues with focus. I might just have to go back to using my old camera again. I think that should be close enough for us. Okay. Only thing is now I've got to move this in a little closer. I'm going to get rid of our stamp set here. And we'll move this. And let me see how that does. Okay. I'm just going to reposition my light a bit because I need it a little brighter, and I'm just going to make sure that's not going to blow it out. Four cups, too much. I mean, I jokingly always say there's no such thing, but yes, there is such a thing as too much coffee. Wouldn't be a very a good piece of advice that I'm passing on being in the healthcare profession. But I indulge in way too much coffee. This is actually only because I had about half a cup before I popped on, because like I said, I had gone to bed for a little bit after coming off work this morning. So then the first thing I did was put on a pot of coffee and had a wee little bit, and then filled my cup again before coming to do our video. Okay, so I'm trying to remember what I started with here. We'll just go ahead. We'll start with the little green mushroom. And oh, I did use the white actually on this as well, because I'm just noticing now, I forgot, but I had added these little spots onto all the mushrooms here. So they're not actually part of the image. I had added them on. So I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think I just went in over top with the white afterwards, and then added some drop shadows behind. So let's start off. We'll get some of our buff titanium here, and I'm gonna just get a puddle of that here. And I think we'll start with the areas kind of underneath there, those mushrooms. So I'm just making a nice puddle of that there. Whoops, that got stuck. I have little magnet pieces taped or stuck onto the bottom of these pots of paint, but for whatever reason they don't want to stick to all of them, and the buff titanium is one, so it's wiggling around and just being difficult. And I just want to get a nice big puddle of that there that I can work with. Okay, and then I'm going to grab some neutral tint and have a bit of that beside it here. Okay, and then maybe I'll just grab a little bit of yellow ochre in case I want to add a bit of that too. Should have wet my paints ahead of time there so that they were ready to go, just in case I want to put a bit of that in there. Okay, so let's start with doing the stems of the mushrooms here. So I'm going to grab a little bit of water on my paintbrush here and grab a bit of that neutral tint and just blend a little bit into some of this neutral, or pardon me, buff titanium, or your like ivory color. And because this is such a small area, I'm not doing like wet in wet here, okay? And we'll just come down this stem here. I'm gonna have to move that light a bit because it's creating a glare as my paper is wet here. So I'm just using a damp brush here to pull that paint here, but I'm starting kind of on that left side, imagining like if the light were coming down this way. And I'm going to grab a little bit more of that neutral tint just to pull down that left edge again. And that's all to start there. I'm going to let that dry. So I'll move on to my next one and build the layers up. So again, a little bit of the neutral tint into that buff titanium. And pull it across here. And then picking up a little bit more of that neutral tint and dropping it in along that left side there. And underneath the mushroom cap as well. And it'll dry pretty quickly because we didn't wet the paper ahead of time. So we'll be able to get back to work on detailing those pretty quickly. We don't have to wait a long time for it to dry. Then we'll get this one here as well. Now this one's a little different because it's got the underside of the cap. So let's just work on the actual stem. So you'll see right along here on the image is where that stem is joining the underside there. So we're going to go along that edge. Drop that in first there. Oops, just getting a clean damp brush to bring that color across that stem. And then let's mix some of that neutral tint in and get that along this left-hand side here. And up where that joins the edge of the underside of the mushroom. Okay, and these ones are already dry, I can see here. So I'm going to go back in now and we're going to start to build some of this up. A little bit more neutral tint into the mix here. And let's go back to this one here. Actually, I'm going to wet it now. Hold on one sec. Just lightly, because I don't want to lift the pigment that we've already put down. So I am just wetting that there. And we're going to start to build up this shadow right underneath the mushroom cap here. Just a little bit more of a shadow against that edge there, and just underneath a little bit as well. And I'm going to let that dry again. And we're going to come back and do that on these other ones a bit here as well. So just wetting the whole stem here. Not scrubbing because I don't want to lift what's down there already. I just want to re-wet. And you don't want to pour a bunch of water out here. It's just damp. Just damp. And then the same thing here underneath that mushroom cap. And we'll continue to build that up as we go. We'll get some color into the caps of the mushroom as well to help us decide like how dark we have to go. Okay. And then while this one's still damp, I am going to go back in with a little bit more. And I'm just thinking about how when the light's hitting here, there's going to be that darkest bit of shadow like right underneath that mushroom cap there. So I am just amping up that neutral tint a little bit in there. And then it's not as dark as we're coming down the rest of the mushroom. Same thing here. And it's kind of angled. All right, and then let's go back to this last stem here. Grab a bit of water and we'll wet that area. If you go outside the lines on this one. Doesn't really matter because we're going to fussy cut these ones out. And so here we have a couple of shadows to think about because this little mushroom cap is also in front of this stem. So we're going to have a little bit here as well of a cast shadow or drop shadow, whatever you want to call it. Just grab a little bit more of that buff titanium to mix in there as well. And then let's amp up this shadow on the top edge here a little bit of the stem. And just underneath this little bit of the smallest mushroom cap as well. Okay, we're going to go back and add a little detailing now to this one here, and I'm just picking up a mixture of that neutral tint and the buff titanium, and I'm just going to add just a couple like little streaks almost. These ones have lines drawn into them, this one doesn't, but I want to add a little bit of texture into this stem so that it's not just flat there. I'm kind of dragging that across there, and then I can come back in with a mix of that neutral tint and buff titanium just to play. And you're going to want to make sure this is dry when you're doing this, but I'm just emphasizing some of those lines that are drawn by the artist here, by Michelle, for the texture in those stems. Sorry, I know my hand's a little in the way, but you can see when I move there. And this is why having a paintbrush that comes to a nice, this one's actually still wet, so I gotta wait for that, comes to such a nice sharp point here is good, because you can really get these fine details in there. I don't want to totally lose the buff titanium. I want a little darker, I'm seeing in these, than I did in my sample, but that's okay. I am going to do the underside now because this part of it is pretty dry. So let's go in tiny bit of neutral tint into the buff titanium here. And just pop that color in here. Just rinsing off my brush a little bit so that I can dilute that pigment right on the paper. Okay, and then we'll start adding a bit of shadow in there. I'll come right along the edge of the mushroom cap. So I'm picking up a little bit more neutral tint on my brush. Also, don't feel shame over drinking coffee. I mean, it is, after all, kind of a half coffee themed retreat, right? Can't really be creating with coffee themed papers and stamps, which, by the way, I love that stamp set. But to be creating with that, you kind of have to fuel yourself with the coffee. So you've got an excuse there. So I'm doing more of the shadow along this edge where the we can see the top of the mushroom cap, and I'm letting it fade out here. However, I'm going to pick up a little bit more neutral tint from my palette there. I do want to differentiate between the stem and the underside of the cap here. So I am going to pick up a little bit more of the neutral tint and come along this right edge of the stem, but put it alongside there, so that I've got that little bit of a highlight on the right side of the stem, but the shadow that is butting right up against it on the underside of the cap. Okay. Whoops, that had a little bit too much pigment on it still. I'm just lifting a little bit of that off there. Okay. now that this part of it, the stem, is a little bit more dry, I can come in and add some of those texture marks. And even though we stamped in the Totally Taupe ink, they are showing through a little bit. So I don't have to like put a big dark line along every one, because you can kind of see a little bit of it. But I do want to add some in there. So I'm just picking a few random spots to kind of emphasize those lines. Oh my God, I'm overheating. Okay. There we go. So I just need to wait for, I think this side's still a little wet here. I'm actually just going to go back in with a little bit more of the buff titanium. Got a little too gray under here, but it will dry a little lighter. So, but I can work on this other side here, pick up a little bit more of that neutral tint. And just add in a couple of lines under here. Not add them, you're going along the lines of the image. And then let's see if I can add some of them in here yet, if it's dry enough. If you go to add these fine details and they're kind of blooming out, it's because your paper is just still a little too wet to add the detailing in. So just wait for it to dry a little more. And I'm just adding just a bit onto that bottom edge. Okay. All right, and those are the stems pretty much done there. Okay. I think I am going to go back with a little bit more of the buff titanium though. And this just got a little gray on this one here. I think I'm just going to add just a little wash over top, just to bring that ivory, creamy kind of color back in. And maybe just along this edge a little bit here as well. And right there. There we go. So it's got a little bit of a glow, kind of, if you will. All right, so that's that. You only drink decaf. I would almost say, what is the point? But the taste of coffee is delicious. I've actually been trying to make some of my own iced coffees, because I kept seeing all over TikTok that people are using the Nescafe Instant Espresso to do iced coffees at home. So I picked some up. Now, I got the original version. I think a lot of people are using the blonde version. And it's not bad. It's still not quite as good as when I've had them out, but like I've been doing it like with a bit of brown sugar and sometimes adding like a little hint of maple syrup in, or vanilla, and then like a bunch of milk and a bit of cream as well. I haven't been like whipping my, or not whipping, frothing, that's the word I'm looking for, frothing my milk or anything like that. But it's not bad. I don't quite have the taste. I don't know if I need to get like some of the coffee syrups or something, but it's not bad. It's not bad. It's certainly, if I could kind of perfect that, not that I buy iced coffees all the time, but it's definitely cheaper doing your own. Okay, let us now make a puddle on our palette here. We will start with the green. So I'm going to grab, I had told you that I was going to use Undersea Green, which is my favorite green. Yes, that is an effect of caffeine. That's why people need to be careful with like energy drinks and stuff, because there's so much caffeine. They can be very dangerous to overconsume. So everything in moderation. And you know, who was it that said they were on 4 cups? Margaret. You're not saying how big those cups are, so. Or how strong your coffee is. Oh, but Margaret, oh, sorry, it's you who's drinking the decaf. I'm just noticing that now, so you're fine. Okay, so I've got some of my Undersea Green here, but I'm also going to be using that buff titanium here as well. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mix some right into the green puddle here to just make kind of a nice pastel green. Okay. And that's in keeping with our paper here. So you can always kind of pull your paper beside your puddle of paint and see if we're close to that green. We could even go like a little bit lighter, but it's pretty darn close there. So yeah, I buff titanium. I don't reach for it too often when I'm doing other things, but I've found some of the, what? I'm trying to think of which other retreat it was. I think it was one of the ones with the florals. Yes, it was when we did the set with like the tulips, and the card that I did for that, because we had such pretty pastel papers. Oh my goodness, I have like the hiccups. The buff titanium really came in handy for that. So, all right. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to wet this mushroom cap. Just a layer of clean water here. Reason being is that where your paper is wet is where your paint is going to flow. And this will help me get a nice soft blend. So come along the edge of the other mushroom cap. And don't get any water into that, because that's going to be our pink one. So as always, when you're doing wet into wet, just want a nice even sheen to your paper. No puddles of water. It shouldn't be dripping. But you might have to go over it a couple times, because watercolor paper is pretty thirsty there. And so you want it to really soak in. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to pick up a bit of that green. And I'll just start over on that left-hand side, because that is where our area of greatest shadow will end up being. But we'll just pull an even layer across. And I'm just going to start putting in a little bit more concentrated pigment on this edge and letting the wet paper carry it over. And it'll do the job for me of getting that nice blend. Whoops, now see, I did get some green onto that mushroom cap. I'll have to see if I can lift it off in a minute here. But I don't want to add any more water to that area right now. Okay, I'm going to start to pick up a little bit more green. And add a bit of that right along that edge. And a little bit along this bottom and underneath this pink mushroom cap here as well. And then I can pick up a little bit of my neutral tint as well. Is that in the, yes, it is in the frame. A little bit of neutral tint. Went from a little bit to a lot bit very quickly there. And you can see that, just as the name implies, neutralizes that tint there. And we'll add just a bit along there as well while it's still wet. A little bit more right at the bottom edge there, because that's kind of going to be the furthest area from the light. And then just where that pink mushroom cap is going to sit as well, because there's going to be a bit of a cast shadow there, and we can emphasize that a little bit later. And we're going to let that dry. In the meantime, because this yellow mushroom cap isn't touching any of that, let's get, and we'll just go on the same area as the green. Maybe here I'm going to mix up some of the yellow ochre and get some of that neutral tint mixed with that. I am going to actually, just one sec, I'm going to tear a little piece of my paper towel off here, and I'm just going to dry up here because I don't want that neutral tint bleeding into that yet. There is a bit on here, but I don't care if a little bit gets mixed in. I just don't want to add a lot to it yet. Okay. A little bit more of the yellow ochre here. Okay, let me wash my brush off. Thank you, Margaret. And as you can see, it doesn't really take a whole lot of work. I do feel like when I'm looking at my sample, I got a little too solid with the gray here. I wish that I would have let it dry a little bit more with the buff titanium and just kind of dry brush this in, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be exactly the same. It'll still work. So I'm just going to go ahead and paint right in on this. This is such a tiny little mushroom cap. So I'm starting over on that left-hand side, and then I'll just kind of rinse my brush off a bit and bring that pigment across. Concentrate a little. Sorry, I'm flipping my paper around as I go here. Concentrate a little bit more along that bottom edge and kind of leaving a little bit of a glowy area there. I don't want to put too much pigment there. Okay, and now we got to be careful with the neutral tint here, but we are going to pick up some neutral tint and start to mix that in a bit here. And we'll drop some along here because you're going to have a shadow from this mushroom cap onto that one. But we don't want it to be like full on like mud color here. So just add that along here. And I'm going to let that dry like that. We can come back up now to this mushroom here. And we're going to add some of that detailing. So I'm getting some of the mix from the neutral tint and our green. And just following along the lines that are already drawn into the mushroom, I'm going to add the detailing here. A little bit more neutral tint in there. So if your round brush doesn't come to quite so fine a point, you could use something like a liner brush or a rigger, they're also called, which does have a really fine point. I'm also going to just emphasize some of the bottom edges here of this mushroom because it's got such a pretty kind of frilly edge here. I'm just going to get a little darker. Okay, and then this part here I don't want to be quite as dark, so we'll have less of the neutral tint in as we're getting into this lighter area of the mushroom here. Okay. A little bit more of the neutral tint here. And just make a couple of these ones just a little bit darker. And we're going to need to make that drop shadow quite a bit darker there. Just because it's kind of all blending into each other. So I'm going to pick up some watered down neutral tint here. And just re-emphasize that shadow. Okay. And then we're going to add those dots in, but we'll do that afterwards because I think that I'm going to work on the other mushroom cap so we can do all the dots sort of at the same time. I am going to come in here and with a little bit stronger of a shadow here, just play up where there would be a shadow from that mushroom cap casting onto this other one. I'll just do that, and then I'm going to just pick up a bit more neutral tint just to make it even darker underneath that cap. And I'm kind of getting up into the edges of that frilly mushroom bottom there. And maybe we'll just add a little bit more detailing in along that stem there. Just a couple of random little lines. Okay. Now this one here, we can add a bit more of a shadow as well. Now that it's dry, we're going to put a little bit more of the neutral tint into that yellow. And let's think about the sun's going to be blocked out from this here. So we'll just add a shadow across it there. And it's okay to have a bit of a harsh edge on that shadow because it's being cast from the mushroom above. So we're not looking for that to blend. Just going just a hint darker there. Dabbing off my brush, and we'll let that dry. All right, let's mix the pink up. So that's where I use this Potter's Pink, and this one I am going to have to work a little harder to wet there and build up a puddle on my palettes. And let me just see if I can move this up a bit so you can see the area that I'm working in. We're doing for time. We're an hour in. We always chat for a little bit first, so I guess that's not too bad. Usually I only do one card. I got a little ambitious with you guys there, so okay. So there's that Potter's Pink, which, yeah, like I said, it's a really nice earthy pink. I do like that. And then let's grab some of the Buff Titanium and we'll mix it in there. That got a little too yellowy, so a little bit more of the pink. Come on now. And that's about right, I think. All right, let's go ahead, and this is a bigger mushroom, so I am going to wet this one ahead of time here. I forgot to lift off where I kind of went over it in green, but that's okay, we'll make it work. Okay. Pick up some pink now, and as with all the other ones, we're going to start along that left edge there and let that paper, or pardon me, that paint travel along the wet paper. We'll help it to move a little bit here. Again, trying to think of the light hitting this right edge. So I'm just adding kind of the least amount of paint to that area. And I'm going to go in with more of the Potter's Pink now and try to just add a little bit more along this edge here. And just dry off my paintbrush a little bit and just help it to move a bit. Okay, and then let's get a bit of that neutral tint. Not too much, just a little dab will do. And then we'll put just a little bit along this edge here, not too much because it's the one that's in front, so it's not getting like that cast shadow that the other ones are. But we'll add a bit just so that it has a little bit of variation in there and it's not just solid. All right. Okay, so what we can do now, because we're just going to let that dry, I am going to pick up a little bit more of that neutral tint back into that area that we were mixing originally for the stems, because I'm going to just add a little bit more of a shadow on the underside there, and maybe under this yellow one there too, and right there, and alongside right there. And just maybe along the lip there. All right, we can add the polka dots now, or spots. I'm gonna pull in my bleed proof white, and I usually just kind of work right out of the jar, but maybe I'll pull some into this little dish here. Whoops, went into my wrong water. I'm just going to add a little puddle of this in here that we can work with. Okay. I gotta wait for that pink one to dry, but the green and the yellow ones are dry. So I can go in here, and you can use like a gel pen or gouache or whatever you have on hand. But I'm just gonna add in some little spots here. Careful not to make them look too even or well plotted out, because otherwise it looks a little too contrived. These are organic shapes, right? So they're not going to be perfect. I can see here I missed a little area with the green paint, so I'm going to make that work and add a white spot and try to make them a little uneven. They don't have to be perfect circles. I think that's enough for that one there. Hello, Danielle. Ooh, you're moving, are you? Busy, busy. Let's go into, and we are going to add some into the shaded area, but we're going to add some of the shadow back in to cover that so that it's not quite so bright. I'll do one big one. Maybe another big one here, and then a couple of small ones. Okay, and then that pink, I can tell that's still too wet. I'm not going to touch that because that's just going to make a big mess. So we got to wait for that to dry now too, because we're going to go back in with the color of mushroom that it's on. We're going to mix up a little shadow to drop in along the bottom edge of these spots. So in the interest of time, while we are letting that dry, if you grab your next card base, and we'll just go through them, what we're going to need for that, okay? I'm just going to push some of these things out of the way, because what we can do is prep our watercolor paper, because we're going to put washi tape on it. So, like I said, shove that out of the way, let it dry a little bit. You're going to get your other card base, which is exactly the same size as the card base that we used for the first one, which is the 8.5 by 5.5. Is that going to fully be in? I forgot that I'm zoomed in. With the score along the 4.25 mark, and so we're going to end up with another landscape card. I just need to make sure that that's going to be in frame. Thanks, Kim. Appreciate that. Another very simple card, just to remind you, this is what this one looks like here. Just simple layers. We let the paper kind of do the work for us because it's such pretty paper. With this one, like the last one, I used a lot of white space to let the card breathe. I kind of was thinking the same thing with this, although I thought we'll let this beautiful green color of cardstock just kind of breathe and not overload it with too many different layers. So we use this light green. Which one was this? This had the, oh, like this, like almost like a robin's egg blue. Such pretty colors. I really love this cardstock. I probably should have got some from you, Kim. Just such nice colors. So that's the one with the blue background there. So 4.25, not 4.25. I can't even read my own writing. My goodness. 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. And then this, we use the dark gray cardstock, which on the back of that is this pink color. Okay. And for the layers here, let me do the pattern paper layers. This is the back of that same piece of paper that has this tag on it. Okay. No, it's not. I'm lying. Which one is it? No, that's true. Yeah, it's the back of that one because it's got all these tags on it. So that's 3 3/4 by 3. And then the dark gray here is 3 7/8 by 3 1/8. Okay, so we'll get rid of that. Whoops, it's sticking to me. And then your watercolor paper should be cut 2 3/4. Everything, I should have mentioned at the beginning, but I had it in my document. Everything is always height times length, okay? Or width, whatever you want to say. 2 3/4 by 3 3/4. And then you've got that dark gray cardstock that is 2 7/8 by 3 7/8. Okay. So those are our simple layers. With this one, if you pull that Marvelous Mocha ink back in, and your ink blending tool, I inked everything up, including the watercolor paper. I'm just going to go along here. I really actually like the way this looks on the watercolor paper. The texture picks it up nicely. I used Arch watercolor paper. It's cold pressed. We'll just ink up the edges of this too, because like I love this cardstock. It does have that kind of white paper core though, so you'll want to kind of conceal that like from your cuts. So simple little ink along the edge will do the trick. So we'll just, like I said, get this prepped while our paint is drying so that you're not just sitting there watching paint dry. You still have some. Well, I may have to scoop some up. I'm not sure if I'm getting a cold. I'm feeling a little off. I started to feel a little off at work last night, so get it out of the way before our Muskoka trip if it's going to happen, eh? Okay. Alongside this beautiful, I love this color so much. It's kind of like our soft sage ink, which I'm going to assume some of the other girls may have used in some of their creations because it certainly would go very nicely with this paper. And this one I did ink, I believe. Yes, I did. I did ink the edge of my card. Oh my goodness gracious. I just dropped that. Well, we're going to use this side of our card base because I just dropped it into the ink anyways. So I've got brown along that side. But this one I did ink alongside or along the edges of my card base. Kind of just wanted it to be a little more earthy. I mean, that other one I had all the white space that I wanted to let really breathe on the card, but this one I wanted to be a little more antiqued. And I guess I was kind of thinking too that, I mean, these would work either way, but I guess I was thinking this one could be a little grungier looking, like a little more masculine, whereas this other one with the little, like, you know, pink mushroom maybe is just a touch more feminine because it's got the flowers on it as well. But okay, so might as well go ahead and we can assemble this card as well. So for this one, we'll just bring our reference in here. Oh, probably that's not going to fit, but just so you can see what we're working on is that. Move that out of the way for a sec again now. And so we're going to take that green layer and put it onto our card base first. You know, I always look at the cards that my fellow teammates create for these retreats, and they're always so creative and so amazing with whether it's cards or other projects like the fun folds and everything that they do. And I apologize, mine are kind of boring compared to that. I tend to not always have the most creative folds and everything, but I love getting the inspiration from them. I mean, these are pretty simple. I've tried to do a couple of fun folds, and then on the last Throwback Thursday, I tried to do a bit more of an interactive card that had like a little slider mechanism on it. That was a lot of work for me. So we've done this layer here, and this is going to go right along this edge here. Make sure your cards are opening the right way. I'm saying that as much of a reminder to myself as I am to you. And we shall put it along this edge here, so we have a little bit of green showing there. And I'm not going to glue down my watercolor paper, but I can go ahead and glue down my cardstock that it's going to be matted on top of. And then all we have to do afterwards is add that watercolor paper to that. So that is just going to go right along here. And I am strategically placing it because if you can see, I do have a coffee cup showing there and there. And again, I don't really think anybody's going to notice it that much because it's such a subtle pattern. But I can just place this right over top of it so you don't even see the coffee theme. Which, I love that theme, but yeah, like with doing the mushrooms with it. That way you're not even really seeing it. So when we do finish that watercolor layer, it's going to go here. I was just thinking, you know, this would be nice and just like a monotone as well. Card, not monotone, monochromatic is the word I'm looking for. So let's pop that out of the way because now we've got that done and ready to assemble. I'm going to pull some washi tape in, painter's tape, washi tape, whatever you'd like to use. I just need to find the edge here. And I'm going to tape along the edges so that we'll have a nice frame for this, nice white frame. Just going to grab my scissors here. How many more classes are to go, Kim? I'm forgetting off the top of my head how many in total there are. Are there 8, 9? Okay, and then I'm just going to flip this right over and fold this washi tape over and crease it there. Make sure it's sealed down nicely there. And then I'll go along this side here. And I'm just eyeballing it, but I'm trying to make about the same width of frame. I'm usually off on one side. The card that I made at Kim's, it was so crooked, it was ridiculous, but my top edge of my tape I had really slanted down. That's okay. I'm okay with that. I am seeing I have to fix it a little bit there. I'm okay with that. Name that artist who said that. I'm okay with that. I'm trying to make it my new mantra in life. I'm okay with that. I am the last for today. But we've got some tomorrow too, I believe, coming your way. 3 tomorrow, that's right. So it was 8 then, because I'm number 5. So I'm just going to continue along here, and we'll put it along the bottom. I think washi tape is fun, and yet I never use it and stuff. I never know what to, I would imagine for those of you who journal, maybe it's a little easier that way. But does anybody use it on your cards? I'm always like, I think I have a couple times, but I get a little stuck on knowing how to incorporate it. But there's so many, like I see washi tape and I want to buy it because it's beautiful and there's some gorgeous patterns out there. But then I just don't always know how to work it in. But like when I see Kim doing her calendars and her journals and such, I love how, like, you know, you kind of string it across the paper there, and that's a lot of fun. But I'm not so good at incorporating it into my work. I think it would be fun maybe to do like some washi tape tags like inside your card, like the way I usually add snippets of whatever design paper that I use. That would be fun. Okay, so I've just kind of cleaned up the edges a little bit there, okay? Trim them up so I don't have great big tails. So that's ready to go for us. Let's set that aside though, and let's pull back these mushrooms here. And those little dots there should be nice and dry. And we're going to pull our watercolor palette back in. And I want to add some little drop shadows underneath those spots. So I'm going to go back into the area on my palette with the green. Get some of that neutral tint mixed into it. And then we're going to come along and underneath each of these, I got to go a little darker. Underneath each of these little spots here, we're going to add, actually, no, that's too dark. I'm going to add a little shadow. Whoops. Again, this is where having a nice point on your brush can come in handy. I thought it was not dark enough. Now I think it's too dark. I'm just mixing up a little bit more of the green into it with the buff titanium. So again, just imagining where the light's hitting it, kind of on this upper right side. I'm leaving the highlight there and adding the shadow on the underside of the dot. And trying to match with the green, because as we're moving into this lighter area of the mushroom, I don't want it to be quite as dark a shadow as, say, these ones over here. So in other words, with me being the last for the day, I can take as long as I want. Is that right? This is turning into longer than I thought it was going to be, but that's okay. I feel like the last few times I've been up for things, it's been a little quicker than I had thought. Okay, now I'm just going to go back in with a clean damp brush and just soften it a little bit. And then I'll go in with just a very, very light green wash. And I just want to tone down a couple of these areas of the white here. Just, they're not quite that bright. The ones that are in the closest to our light source here, it's okay for them to be a little brighter. Okay. Same thing here now with the yellow. Actually, you know what? Before we do that, let's go ahead and do the white dots on the pink here, just so that they'll be ready for us to work on them here too. Just reactivating that white paint there. And do a couple of bigger spots. Kim, are you staying at Carrie's tonight as well, or are you heading home tonight or heading home tomorrow? I'm going to just go back right into my jar here of the white just because I want to get a thicker consistency for along this lighter part of the pink. Rinse my brush off. And you went yesterday up, so a 2-night sleepover. Hi, Lindsay. Yeah, it's that's what I saw these stamps. I was like, oh my goodness, those are screaming to be watercolored. They're so pretty. So, all right, let's get that yellow ochre mixed with some of the neutral tints, and let's just add that little bit of a drop shadow in underneath. Oops, I'm just trying to add a little bit more of the yellow back in underneath these little dots here. Nope, not quite right. Okay, and then I don't know if that's translating for, yeah, I guess it is. I can see it on the green one where it's kind of bringing those spots to life there. Ah, thank you, Heather. That's kind of you to say. Now, though, I must have not gone quite as pigmented on the pink one because those white dots aren't showing up quite as much as I would like them to. So I'll probably go back in with a little bit more white. Oh my goodness. I just put way too much neutral tint in there, but that's okay. We can work with it. We're going to go in and try to get the shadows in under those white ones on the white spots on the pink mushroom now. It should be dry enough. I feel like this didn't take me that long when I made this card. I feel like it worked up pretty quickly. It's probably because I'm taking my time to explain it, though. Ah, now they're showing up. Once the magic of those shadows, man, it's suddenly bring those little dots, makes them three-dimensional, so that it looks like they're kind of popping up off the mushroom surface. There we go. All right, that one needs just a little bit more along this side here. And I'm just gonna clean my brush off here and just soften that ever so slightly. There we go. Now I am going to take some neutral tint and the yellow ochre, just because I feel like these are very bright. And I'm just going to tone down the white spots just a little bit. Same thing with just picking up just a hint of the pink on a few. Just softening that up a little bit. All right, let's grab some of that neutral tint that was on our palette there, and let's just see if there's anywhere we have to put a little bit more of a shadow. I feel like this mushroom could use just a little bit more of a shadow. I'm going to go right over top of some of those spots there. And I feel like here we could emphasize that a little bit more. And let's just go down those sides of the stems there again. I think in underneath this mushroom cap here. And let's go a little deeper with a couple of those edges, those little texture marks under the mushroom cap there. Okay, and I think we'll call that one done. So now we have to fussy cut it out. Always so fun to watch, eh? Now, when I fussy cut out things that have been colored with marker or pencil, I always like to go around, similar to how we ink the edges for the cardstock to hide that white paper core. I always go along with a marker to do the same thing when I fussy cut, because I don't want that white edge of the paper to be so stark. And also, say you're fussy cutting out an image to put onto pattern paper, you want it to look like it's part of the pattern paper, and if you've got this white paper core, it makes it stand out. So I like to do it because it helps it to sink into whatever you're going to adhere the fussy cut item onto. A little trickier with the watercolor paper. So what I did was I just kind of went and picked up off my palette on my paintbrush, went around the edges, and it's not perfect, but it does help to do the same thing, just to not disguise it, but just will help it to sink into the paper that we're going to put it onto. It'll make it look like it was actually part of the design paper to begin with, and not that you've, you know, added this sticker on top of it. So, oh my goodness, we still have a whole other card to do. We don't have to fussy cut that one though, so there's not that part, and we already have the card base made. Everybody amping up for fall? Who's done some fall decorating while I'm fussy cutting here? I was actually thinking that on this stretch of days out, I'm going to get out my bin of fall stuff. I don't have like a ton, but I do have like some fall artificial greeneries and stuff that I put up, and I've got a couple pumpkin things, and pull out like my fall scented candles that I can put into my little tray on my dining room table. But I felt like it was a little too early before, but now I want to have it up long enough that I can enjoy it. And I usually leave it right up until I decorate for Christmas at that point. So I'm just going to go along here. Let's pick up a little bit of the green. I don't want to go too wet with my brush, but I am just going to just lightly go around these edges here. And I'm trying to pick up, like, as I go into a darker area, I'm trying to pick up, like, the darker paint from my palette there. So that's the green. I don't have a whole lot of the yellow left on my palette there, but we'll go in. Let me pick up a little bit more there. Like I said, it's not perfect, but it just helps a little bit. This is more shadowed in here, so we can go a little darker there. pink. Always a little harder to re-wet that Potter's pink. There we go. And then we've got all of our stem areas. So we'll just pick up here. Make it a little darker along those bottom edges there. I just don't want anything to be too bright, so it doesn't have to be perfect. But especially where the shadows are, it looks pretty silly to have like a bright white edge of the paper on it. And I think that'll probably be good enough. All right, let's pull in our card base. And we're going to add it there. Now I usually use my Tombow glue, but I'm going to use my the art glitter glue, just because that way if it oozes out, the Tombow glue always stays a little tacky if it oozes out, and I don't want that to happen. And I need to get, because the watercolor paper is heavier and it's a little bit warped, which happens, so I'm trying to get a hold of it, which happens with watercolor paper. As you add the water there, it's going to warp a bit. But because of that, unlike when I glue normal paper down with my Tombow glue, which is my favorite, I don't have to go right up to the edge of it. But with this, I do, in order to adhere it flat, because of the little bit of warping that happened. And if I do that with the Tombow glue, if it oozes out, then I'm going to have like this tacky bit whenever you touch the card, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to use this art glitter glue because it dries clear and it does not have that permanent tackiness there. So, and it's just a little easier to get around the edges, or the skinny little edges of the mushroom. Now, when I stuck this down here, I wanted to have it overlap a little bit here. So I'm going to stick it down here so that the green overlaps a bit there. There we go. And I'm just looking, did I add a little bit of a shadow? Or is that just, no, that's just from the light. I was wondering if I had added a bit of shadow underneath with paint or something, but I didn't. Okay, so there's card number 1 done. I'm just making sure that that glue is gripping to all of the edges here so that that lays nice and flat. Okay, card number 1. Oh, that's kind of you, Mary Pat. Thank you so much. But you guys are all talented. You all make such amazing things. You amaze me every time that you guys post stuff in the group. I love seeing it. I don't get around to comment on everybody's, but I'm always like, my goodness. And just the creativity that you guys all share. Everybody brings their own style and their own flair. And I love that we can have the same stamp set that we're working with, and even the same supplies. And like, look at this, like from this retreat, we're all working, because what Kim does when we decide, you know, how many of us are able to participate, she takes one kit and we share that kit amongst us, so that way, you know, you can participate in every class and you will have enough of the supplies to be able to make all the things that we have made, plus extras, because you're going to have leftovers. But we share the same kit, and my goodness, it's always they're always so different. And I love that, because everybody has their own style. And so even with the same base supplies, you know, it's just incredible how it's just, you know, I can look at things and go, that's a Patty card, that's a Heather card, you know, it's incredible. I'm going to sign this because it's artwork, so you're going to sign it. So, and then I always put the year, and that's card number 1 done. Now we have to do card number 2. And it's 20 to 4. What happened? Okay, where did I put my other one? There it is there. Let's pull this in here. And I guess I'm still trying to decide color-wise. Maybe we will just stick with the yellow mushrooms. I don't know. It's just, the red was a little easier. I don't know how the red's going to look. What do you guys want to do? Do you want to do red or do you want to do yellow mushrooms? I'm going to leave it up to you. Discuss amongst yourselves. Let me bring in what we're doing. So this was here. I mean, the yellow I feel goes really nicely because it's nice and like it's harmonious with the greens. And there's no other red anywhere to pull the red into. So that's why I was like, I don't know about the red. Mary Pat says red. We have 1 vote for red. So it will be kind of similar to how, if you saw my card that Kim has at her house, it would look like that. That's a second red. Okay. Then I guess we'll probably go with red. The people have spoken. And by the people, I mean Mary Pat and Margaret. Okay, so for this one then, we are going to be making a little bit of a background. So we are going to need your blue. I use cerulean blue. We'll keep with that neutral tint. I know that I used, I guess like the burnt umber, the brown that I had you guys use. I used that mostly, I think, in that yellow mushroom, which I didn't even end up using. I may have used that a bit in the other one too. Anyways, and obviously the green, we will not need the Potter's pink, so I can put that aside. We might use a bit of the buff titanium. I'm going to decide because I need to see how bright that alizarin crimson is going to be. Yeah, y'all just be quiet over there. Listen, I made one card and it came together so quickly when I made it. I was like, well, that's boring. I need to do a second one. And yeah. Y'all be quiet. Okay, we're going to go with red. So I have the permanent alizarin crimson for my red. Maybe I'll give my palette a little wipe off here. Remember, I've already assembled the card base for card number 2. So there's that. All right, let's clean that off there. So we're going to make a little foresty scene. This is, it's tiny here. So this trio of mushrooms actually is a trio of stamps. So the other one we had to build our scene. This is that little one. And this one has the little white dots. I added some extra ones on there, but it does have the white areas on there. And that's kind of what I took inspiration from for the other one that I added them to. So I'm going to pull over my palette here. I've got to pull my water closer again. And I'm going to start off, we're going to get a little puddle of our blue, which again, I've got the cerulean blue. And I'm just going to, on that same area, get a puddle of my undersea green. And I'm going to mix it with some yellow ochre to start with there. Ooh, no, don't like that. It's too yellowy. A little bit more green there. Okay, because then I can have some variation. Okay. So what we're going to start doing is get the green off my paintbrush here. And I'm going to wet my paper here. I'm going to imagine that the floor of like the grass is going to meet the horizon line about there. So I'm going to wet everything above that. You can draw this line if you want to. I'm not going to. I'm just going to draw it with my water. So I'll go about here. And I know you can't see that, but everything under here is going to stay dry for now. So I've got to go around the edges of my mushrooms, and we are going to do wet in wet initially here. And this is where you want to make sure that that painter's tape or washi tape, whatever you used, is well stuck down so that the water's not bleeding under it. If it does, oh well. What do we say? Say it collectively. I'm okay with that. Did anybody even identify who I'm quoting? Now what I need to think about here is it was right along here. I know you can't see it, but it was right along here that I wet for the grass meeting the sky. So I'm just going to eyeball it and say if I kind of come straight up here, that's where that line would be. I know you did. I'm quoting our lovely Danielle, who just has the most wonderfully positive attitude when she's creating, and always so relaxing to watch. And she just has that attitude that if something doesn't quite go as planned, that I'm okay with that. And then she makes it work and always turns out amazing. And I really appreciate that just relaxed attitude, because I mean, number one, we're doing this because it's supposed to be fun. We're supposed to be enjoying it. And if we get all stressed out and beat ourselves up over every possible thing that could go wrong, it's not fun anymore. So, okay, so I'm just, again, tracking along and saying that's going to be about there. And if it's not perfectly even, that's okay, because grass and the ground undulates as like little hills and valleys, so it doesn't have to be perfect. And if it doesn't end up being perfectly straight, then that's okay. We'll make it into a little bit of a hill. But that's, like I said, I don't usually go in and draw it in with a pencil. I just go for it. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna get a nice, what word is that? I'm gonna water down and get a nice light blue here, and I'm gonna kind of start in the center here. So we have this little bit of sky that's going to be peeking through. And I don't care if it's perfectly even, because if we have some little gaps, it'll just look like clouds. I'm going to come right over to the edge here, because I'm going to add some bushes or foliage, trees, whatever. And then you'll have like little bits of blue that peek through in spots. So it'll just look like the sky is peeking through those trees. But again, I don't care if it's perfectly even. It doesn't have to be. Okay, and then we'll just kind of come in through here too, just in case I don't fully coat this all in the green. Okay, and that's all I'm going to do for our sky. Okay, while this is wet, I'm going to come in here. I'm going to mix some of this green, get it into the blue a little bit, just so that it's a harmonious color. And we're going to start to dab in some little shapes, and we will make it into a tree. You can, if you want, like tip this a little bit to help the paint run. Doesn't have to be perfect. I'm doing a little bit more concentrated of the green at the edges here, and then just a little smattering of green, which we'll make into, like, we'll add like some branches and stuff in there maybe, or the look of branches. This is far off in the distance, so let me just see here. This side of my paper is starting to dry a little bit, so I got to work quick here and get this green in here. Just add a little bit in there. Again, doesn't have to be perfect. I don't care if it fully covers it, because that little bit of blue peeking through makes it look a little bit more realistic. Oh, I can hear Dean just got home. I wonder if he's going to remember that I'm on a live video. I meant to text him before I got going. I did tell him yesterday, but okay. Now, while it's still wet, I'm going to start to grab some darker greens, and I'm just going to add a bit here and there. Letting it blend up into that wet paper, and we'll play around once it's dry with the patterns that it created to kind of pick out some different textures. Okay. Just dabbing here and there and everywhere. Well, not everywhere. That's a lie. Because I don't want it to be uniform. Okay. And like I said, it's not spreading as much now, so that paper is drying. And I think we'll let it do its thing here and dry there. All right. What we can do, we're going to do the same thing with the stems on these mushrooms. We're going to throw our paint things around. So some buff titanium. I'm going to make a puddle of that. And then we'll have some neutral tint as well beside there. Okay. So let's start with this here. Okay, throw some buff titanium onto, oh, I just realized this probably isn't quite dry yet. We're going to live dangerously, but you really should let that dry. I was just trying to think of where to jump around here to keep working rather than just having these gaps in the video where we're waiting for paint to dry. Going in with a little bit more of the neutral tint here down this side. Same idea. I'll have my light source coming from this way. So we've got these like two little frilly edges here that we're gonna be working with in this mushroom stem. So I think we'll just do that to start with for that one. And then let's go ahead and start with the neutral, not the neutral tint, the buff titanium, and these two as well here. And then we'll come in, maybe just add a hint of the yellow ochre in here. And drop in a bit of shadow here along those left edges. I went outside lines a bit here, but that's okay because that's all gonna be in green. If you guys have any questions at all at any point, just fire them up on the screen there. I will try to answer them. Go along here as this is drying and just get underneath that frilly edge there. And just add some textury lines in here. Same thing with these ones. These ones don't have any of the lines drawn in. And I just want to add a bit here. Okay. I should have waited till that was a little drier there, so I'm just going to go in and just soften that, and we'll wait till it dries and add some more texture in there, because I don't want it looking fully gray there. I want to retain that beigey color. Okay, so there's that. As this green is drying here, I'm just going to come in here and just pick up some of these areas here that are a little darker. That have just naturally kind of created almost like the edge of a bush, and I'm kind of coming in and playing up the edge here. Using the way that the paint has dried here to kind of dictate where I'm putting my layers. So I mean, these could be trees. Maybe I'll just paint them as if they're bushes here. So I'm emphasizing these areas here a bit, and then I'm using a clean damp brush to kind of fade them out a bit. And I'm going to use little bits of neutral tint in there as well, in a couple spots, and still retaining those little areas of blue that are peeking through there. Just a little bit darker down into here, a couple spots. And I don't know, maybe we might add some stems in there. We'll see. Okay, let's go over to this side here now. Oops, that's too dark. And let's see what we can do here. Cool. This side's quite dry. So I'm just applying some of the pigment and then using a clean damp brush to soften it, but just using it to play up the edge that the paint itself has kind of created. Okay, let's see here. Pick up on this edge here as well. And let's just add a little bit more into the bottom here. And maybe we'll just darken up underneath this mushroom cap here as well. Just wetting that paint on my tray a little bit more. And just adding a little bit more detailing in here. Nothing too fussy. I feel like we need some darker green in here. Okay. Trying to decide if I want to make those into some light stems there. Maybe we can just go in with a really faint green here. We'll just do just some bluey green light stem work off in the distance. So kind of picking these gaps here and connecting these little kind of floating areas of green so that it looks like they belong to the foliage. And nothing too fussy, just adding some stems in there. Maybe up into this area here too, but very, very faint so that it looks like they're way off in the distance there. Maybe a couple there. And I just want to soften in here. Kind of lost edges in there. And then I can come in with a little bit more green just to kind of pick up on those areas where the stems kind of meet those areas of leaves and just add a little bit more definition in there so that it all makes sense. And then we'll soften it a little bit. Thanks, Margaret. Easy peasy though, as you can see, it's coming together very, very quickly. Maybe we'll add just a little bit of more textured leaves up in here. I'm not going to add stems in there, so that looks more like a little bit of a bush in here than a tree. I'll just add a couple little spots here and there. There we go. I'm going to leave it at that. And then I think I'll just go ahead in and do the grass. We'll get some yellow ochre here. And I think actually I will use a little bit of that burnt umber in here too. A little bit of burnt umber, yellow ochre, and pick up some of that green there too. A little bit more of the yellow ochre. And I'm just going to go right ahead and just put in a quick layer of that. I'm not too worried about the bottom of the stems because we are going to build up some grass texture over top of those mushroom stems to make them look like they're seated in the grass. So just going right over top there, adding that base layer of kind of that yellowy brown. Maybe add just a couple spots where there's a little bit stronger yellow coming through. And then I'm going to go right in with some green. And start building that up a bit. I'm being messy, as you can see. Nothing too fussy. Underside that much. Whoops. Didn't want to be that messy. Let's clean that up there. There we go. We'll clean that up. Okay, and then just going to build up a couple of areas with the green. And then we can drop in a couple more areas with a bit of yellow just to break it up. Add a little bit of the neutral tint in there as well. And we'll come in afterwards like to add like some clumps of grass. We should add a little bit of that blue in there too from the sky, just so that it all works well together. It's going to be dark under these mushrooms with the shadows that they're casting. So I'll just go ahead and start to build that up. And I think I'm going to let that dry there. Okay, let's start to mix up our reds. So alizarin crimson. I still have to work on these mushroom stems, but let's get this started here. It's going to be very bright. So let's see about what happens if I add a bit of the what's it called? Buff titanium in there. Yeah, I think that'll work a little better. And just maybe a hint. What if we add a little bit of the green in there? Because green is the complementary color to red. And that will just help to neutralize it a little bit too, so that it's not quite so obnoxious. Okay, I just want to add a little bit more paint though, so that I don't run out of it partway through. Okay, I think that should work. Before though we get into working with that, let's clean our brush off and let's get a little bit more of the buff titanium, and let's just paint. I'm going to do this top frilly layer here because there's this one and then the one that's just underneath it. So I'm going to put some of that buff titanium down, go in with a clean damp brush just to fade it out there a bit, and then pick up a little bit of the neutral tint to come right underneath the mushroom cap. Let's take a bit more of that neutral tint right now and just to play up underneath here because this area is dry. Just to get that shadow there. Add a little bit more underneath the mushroom cap, but don't let it come all the way down because we're going to add some texture lines in there, and then we've got this little extra bit in there as well. So while that's kind of drying there, let's add in a bit of texture here. Let's emphasize that edge of the stem of the mushroom. Kind of do like some little like blotches or dots in a couple of spots here. I do have to fix up this edge here too with the grass because that got a little bit messy. Okay, and then we can do the same thing here. We're going to have a shadow. So almost like a triangular shape, narrow here and getting a little wider as we come down that edge of the mushroom stem. Same thing here, and we're bringing this down. Oh, thank you, Kim. It's not hard though, guys. You can see it kind of coming to life here, right? It's just adding little bits here and there, building up in layers. A little bit darker underneath here yet. And there. And there. And we may have to darken up a bit yet as we work along. But when we get the red in, that'll help us to decide there too. Just going to do a couple of texture lines in these mushroom stems. Kind of rounding these ones a bit just because this is kind of a chubby mushroom stem there. Okay. This is still a little wet here, so I don't want to touch that middle frill yet, but I am going to go in with that neutral tint here just to add that shadow from the cap of the mushroom. And then we're going to use a less concentrated bit of paint and add in just some little frilly lines here, kind of swooping out this way to follow the direction there. Okay, we're gonna let that dry. Let's add in some of the grass here. So we're gonna mix up a darker green, some neutral tint, just gonna go right into the puddle of green we already had there. Rinse my brush off here. And let's start to add in some little bits of grass along the back here. I'm just going to go right along that line where the grass meets the background. Just add some grasses in, so just like little, almost like flicky hair motions, kind of. And then we're going to pick a few areas where I've got this darker green here to add just some little tufts of grass. Am I on screen? It's blurring. It's annoying. I gotta figure that out. Whoops, that's quite dark. Okay. So just looking in these little, like I said, just kind of tufts of grass. I'm gonna do some right in the foreground here. So just try not to be doing them all in the same direction because you want some variation there. And we're going to start building that up kind of underneath the mushrooms too. And we're going to come right over top of the stems. Like I said, be careful not to do them all looking the same. Okay, and then that one there too. Okay, and then let's do another area here. And then do some right in the foreground here. And then we can do some maybe in the background there. And then I'm going to add a little bit of a watery mix right underneath these areas, and watery mix of the green, and just kind of sweep it across and soften that out a little bit. I mean, even while that's still a little damp, you can just use the pigment that you put down there just to soften the blend. I'm going to get some more neutral tint in now, go a little darker because this is going to go right under the mushroom here. And just add that shadow underneath there. And then a clean damp brush and soften that. Okay, I'm going to take just a little bit of this darker here, and where we kind of soften this, just add a little bit darker into the bottom of this clump of grass. Same thing over there. Okay, and that's our ground done. I'm just going to grab another paper towel because this one's pretty wet. Not sure I love those branches there, but it is what it is. We'll be okay with that. Now we have to do our mushroom caps. Okay, we'll start with our big one here, and I am going to wet this. Oh, sorry. I'm going to look to see if I'm in the frame here. I'm going to try, at least with these bigger spots, to avoid wetting them. I mean, I'll go in with the white after, but I am trying to go around them with the water, so that, because remember what I said earlier, that paint will travel on your paper where it's wet. So if I can try to preserve that a bit, I mean, if I had something called masking fluid, which is a pain in the butt to work with, but I could have used that on these. But we're just going to try to be a little fussy and wet around them. And like I said, we do have, it's the advantage with using, say, like a gouache or like a gel pen or something. It's more opaque, and so it is going to go over top of the paint that we're going to put down. Okay, so I'm going to wet that red that I made up there. Maybe just add just a touch more red just to brighten it a little bit. And let's go in. Starting on that left side. See how that's dancing around those spots there? It's kind of fun. I don't know if that's showing where I'm touching down, how it's not actually going on to those spots that I left dry. And we'll clean them up because they're not perfect, but we'll clean them up, especially when we add the white afterwards. And like I said, we're going to add some extra ones anyways. How's everybody doing? Are we painting along, or are you watching first, painting later? Sometimes that's an easier way to follow along with videos, is to watch first and do later. Okay, just cleaning up around those edges of the spots there. And let's drop in now a bit stronger pigment along this edge while it's still wet. So I am working pretty quickly here. Along the bottom edge here as well. And I'll let that bleed up into there. There we go. And let's pick up some of this neutral tint here. Make a little puddle. Oh, this is off the screen, sorry. I'm making a little puddle with some neutral tint and some red there. And let me just drop in a bit. Along this edge here, along the bottom. And just in a couple of random spots, because I don't want this to be completely uniform. But I also don't want it to get super muddy here. Okay, I think we'll let that dry. Is anybody still with me? I really wish the focus would stay. I have to fix that up. I don't know how, I guess people who actually do like the high-tech tutorials and stuff, they have different equipment that maybe doesn't, like maybe they use an actual camera versus their phone, but okay. Let's do this mushroom here. I'm going to do the same thing. And we're going to just wet down the mushroom cap, again trying to avoid as best as you can those little spots. Problem is, it's focusing on my hand is what's being closer to you, and then the painting itself is out of focus. Okay. drop in your color and watch it dance around those spots. So fun. And where, say, I'm not quite close enough to those spots, I can just use the tip of my paintbrush just to kind of tease it closer. Move the pigment so that it comes right up to the drawn lines there of those little speckles. Just going to move this way for a minute. Okay, and then I need to drop in a little bit more of just the red, just to deepen that along this edge. And we're going to add some shadows in there just because it is kind of tucked behind this front mushroom here. So let's pick up some of our shadow shade that we've mixed with some neutral tint and some of the red. And drop that in along here. Once it dries, we can play it up a little bit more with some shadow washes. But I do just want to get a bit of that neutral tint working in while it's wet, just so that, as you can see here, as this is starting to dry, it just gives a really nice texture if it's not like that flat red all the way across. And I'll just bring a couple little spots of that shadow in through there as well. Okay. Rinse our brush off, and we might as well go and finish off with some of this stem now here. So we can do this second, or this middle frilly layer, if you will. And let's grab some of the neutral tint here. No problem, Margaret. I know I'm taking a long time. Sorry. You're in a painting coma. We're going to get in underneath this other little edge here. And let's add a little bit more of a drop shadow here. And just some textury lines. I feel like these didn't quite turn out quite the color I wanted them to. And just using this neutral tint to come in and define those edges there. And then maybe just bring just a bit of a wash of that down these stems a bit. This needs a little bit more texture in this area here. Maybe a little bit of a shadow for underneath. I'm just looking here, I'm jumping all over the place a bit right now, but I am just going to mix up that dark green again. And I'm just going to come back in, because as this grass dried here, it's just a little translucent along these mushroom stems here, and I don't want that. I want it to look like the grass is coming right on over top of them. So we're just going to build that up there again. There we go. Okay. I'm just going to go in with a damp brush here and just try to soften these areas a bit, and just come in just ever so slightly darker under these edges here. Okay. Now I'm going to come in with a little bit darker of a red here, now that this is a bit more dried, and we're just gonna drop in a little bit of a shadow here. And go just a little darker yet, right where it butts up against this other mushroom. I'll watch, because this mushroom has these little white dots that kind of protrude out. Good. Okay. I'll just maybe do a little bit more of a shadow here. Oops. And right there. Okay. I may just come in with a little bit more red, just to brighten this up a little bit more. We'll do just a wash of some red over top of this. Just like so. Same thing here. So I added just a little bit more of that red pigment in to my puddle of paint, and I'm just lightly going over it. I don't want to add too many layers. I want to still have like that translucency that the watercolor has. But I just needed to bring it a little bit more life. Okay, there's those areas. Now I got to do this other little mushroom. This one again, we're going to wet first, trying to preserve those little dots. And then I'll drop in the pigment. And just cleaning up around those little speckles as I go. Just dropping in a little bit more of that red. And then, whoops, that's going to be way too dark. Just a couple areas with the kind of shadowy red. Just so that as it dries, it's not perfectly even. And I will go back in once this is dried and do like the wash with the red again, the way we did for these other ones. Okay, let's dry our paint, or wash our paintbrush off, and I'm going to bring in that little palette with the white. Now you're going to want to make sure your red is perfectly dry, of course, before we do this. But on the ones that are already dry, I'm going to take my white paint or gel pen, whatever you want to use, gouache, and we're going to add picking up a little bit more from my actual jar just so that it's a bit of a thicker consistency. And then I did add a couple of extra ones. Thank you, Mary Pat. I mean, you can't go wrong with a red mushroom, right? Okay, go along here. And we're going to do the same as we did on the other mushrooms, where we'll add that little drop shadow underneath the speckles, because it just kind of makes them pop. And we've got one that is like kind of sticking up off the edge there. There we go. All right, let's add to this one over here. This one's got a white spot right there. Quite a big white spot. We'll do one here. That one. I'm gonna add one right there too. Can't remember if there was one in the original stamp image or not, but we're adding one. Okay, we have to go back and add a wash of red, because like I said, we did that with the other ones, and this one's just losing a little bit of the vibrancy as it dries. So let's just go back in. And it will dry a little duller there, just like the other ones have. Okay, let's add some of the drop shadows underneath those dots there. So a little bit of neutral tint in with your red. And we're going to come in underneath. And same idea, kind of along the bottom edge and just wrapping up along the left edge of these. Leaving the top right edges without the shadow underneath, because that's where the light is hitting from. And don't forget this one here. That's right along the edge there. I'm going to have to come and clean. Oh my, I just noticed I had some bleeding of the red mushroom there. I may have to add some greenery in there to fix that. Whoopsie. This mushroom is drying so much brighter than the other ones. I might have to come back in and do just another little layer of red on the other ones once this dries here. Be a little harder now that we've painted in all these lovely spots. let me grab a little bit more of my red. I started off not wanting them that bright, but this one's drawing so much brighter than these other ones that we're going to carefully around the white. Whoops. I can always come back with white to fix that up if I need to. But just going in with a watery layer, and this is called glazing, where we're just going to glaze that color over here. And let's tidy up this edge here. And so because we're going watery, all of the shading that we've done underneath here will still show. Carefully, don't scrub your brush in because you don't want to lift what's underneath it. You're just adding a layer. Almost done. We'll let that dry. You never eat the red ones. Probably shouldn't eat any mushroom that you're not familiar with, because many poisonous ones out there. Again, let's go a little thicker with the paint here just to tidy up our edges. And carefully going around those red spots, or white spots, pardon me. Sorry, I have to keep turning my paper so I can see what I'm doing. I'm going right over the shadows. Be careful you're not going in with too wet of a paintbrush though, because if you plop down like a big puddle of water, you're going to cause like a weird bloom. Okay, I feel like this one needs just a little shadow under this side of the mushroom cap there. And I'm being a little dangerous right now because I just realized I had just gone in with the wet red here, but we hadn't done the spots yet on this one. You could come in if you wanted to with a little bit of that white if you wanted to just very watery mix. Just add a little bit of highlight and dimension into the stem here, which I think I did do on the sample there. We could kind of just add a few streaks along there. So I always just look and try to figure out what, what does it need? I just felt like this area was lacking in some definition. Now we've just got to add those drop shadows in under these other mushroom dots. Looking to make sure that you're still in the frame, which you are. I feel like this one tried so bright. Just then adding in a little bit more definition here. Those shadows. I think I may call that done. Nope, because I got to fix up that green. That's what I was going to do. So let's go back and grab a bit of that green that we had on our palette earlier. And we're just going to cover up where this red kind of bled, which is actually probably good because then we can kind of clean up the edge of this white spot here too on this mushroom. And clean up the edges around the frilly parts there as well. There we go. That helped. All right, that fixed that. I do feel these mushrooms turn out a little solid red for what I like. I probably shouldn't have done quite as many washes as I did, but they were just looking, like I said, just a little bit dull. What can I do here to break that up a bit? Let me see if maybe what will happen if I take some of this white here. Don't know if that's really going to do what I'm hoping it will. What if I just kind of put in... No, that's not going to work. We'll leave it. You know what? Sometimes it's best just to say hands off and stop what you're doing. So let me move this out of the way here. Just going to clean out my brush, dry that off, put my paints away quickly so that I can, we'll just need to take off the washi tape and stick it down, and we can call it a wrap. Which, I mean, it's still under 2 hours. It's not, right? No, I'm lying. It's under 3 hours. Oh my gosh, here I thought I was doing pretty good. I was like, oh, it's only an hour per card. It was not. It's still not 3 hours. It's still not the longest class I've done. But there's no point rushing because then you're just going to mess something up, and that's really frustrating. So now we're going to take our washi tape off. I mean, I still feel like I could have fiddled around with the background and probably blended in some of this grass a little bit more, but we'll just leave it at that. Hopefully everybody's happy with what they did there. Let's peel off that washi tape, and that's always fun to see the clean edge there that leaves. And we need to, where is my card base? There it is. All right. And this one I'm going to go around with my Tombow glue just because it's not got all the fussy little bits, and I feel like I can get close enough up to the edge with a thin layer where it won't ooze underneath, because like I said, this will tend to be a little tacky. And unlike other paper, I often will just go around the edges, but with watercolor paper, because there's warping with the water, I like to make sure I have glue kind of all over. And we'll get right into the corners there. All right. And then let's add this here. I didn't add a sentiment to this one. You could, if you wanted to. You probably could stamp onto the cardstock or add a little banner from the design paper with a sentiment if you wanted to. I am noticing here these white dots there are a little messy and they're a little too bright. So I think I am going to go in and just try to tone them down a little bit with something. So I fibbed. I am still going to touch. Going to take a really watered down red and just touch into them a little bit just to make them be not quite as white as they are. Just a little stark. I'll just dull them down a little bit there, which we could have mixed a bit of color into the white before we put it on, but can always fix it up after. There we go. Okay, let me put my glue on, or lid on my glue there. And, okay. Nope. There's still a spot that's driving me a little crazy in there. Hold on. Just gonna go in with that darker color for those shadows there and just try to clean up around the edges a little bit. There. Now I'll call it done. Okay. Because that's a little wet there, I'm going to open my card up to sign it here. I keep saying I'm done, but I keep fussing. When I dulled that white down, it just got a little too dull on this one, so I'm just adding a little highlight into that spot. And that one there. Okay, now for real, I'm done. Well, thank you, Mary Pat. I'm sure that yours is going to be gorgeous, and I can't wait to see it. So these are our two cards that we made. Let me see if I have to zoom out or if they, sorry, that's not the other card we made. That was my sample one that I made. Those are the two cards that we made today. So, I'm going to have to zoom out. So one moment. There we go. So we'll zoom out just so you can see again what we've created. I can't wait to see your finished projects. So I had put an album into the group already, labeled with the class number. So when you're done, please add it in there. Let me see your gorgeous work. I guess that red doesn't look too bad with the greens. I was afraid it might look a little too bright, but not too bad. So I can't wait to see what you guys have come up with. Play around with it if you want to change it up. That's good too. I look forward to seeing your handiwork. So again, that was with your stamp set that came along in your retreat. Such a fun guy. So many possibilities with this set. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the retreat. There's lots more fun coming your way tomorrow. If you're forgetting what times everything is, I know Kim had compiled a list of the schedule. So make sure that you're tuned in. And again, all of our videos will eventually be making its way over onto YouTube, but as a private audience for you guys, so it won't be available to everybody else who visits, right? Because that's why you bought your spot in the retreat, so we could have this private little party together. So once they disappear from the Facebook page, fret not, we'll all have links in this Facebook group to the videos on YouTube, so you can have indefinite access to them. Have a great night, and I'll try to catch some of you guys tomorrow in the classes too and have a little chat there. Bye.